Shalom Aleichem. I wanted to complete a topic that we began last time in a previous episode. And that topic is logic true? And there's a discussion I was having with someone just to remind the listener. The person had a question, is logic true? And that led the person to be concerned about whether anything they could prove or believe would have any significance. For example, if a person can show that Judaism is the most compelling path for a person to live, so that's very good as long as logic is true, right? Because if logic's not true, so then um, nothing that we might think holds weight in a sense. And so it was a challenging discussion in that most of the discussion would be based on logic, and logic, of course, is what's in question in that discussion. And so the conclusions are what I wanted to share. The final points that I think were effective and I would recommend perhaps, depending on the person, for such a question. And a lot of times you want to know like what people do accept because usually people are coming from a certain place where there's certain things they accept, certain things they don't accept. And if you can use these like unique or particular things that they do accept and believe and to base things on that's is usually a tawellus there. So what the individual did accept was that we know we exist. And he accepted that because it's definitional, meaning our conscious understanding that we do exist. That in itself is something that, like, just by the even by the way you express it, are very act of identifying that is our existence itself. And so that he was comfortable with. Um, and uh, and so based on that element, one thing that I found to be possibly helpful was to say that like we understand that we exist, and when we say we, like we're understanding like our consciousness. Um, but that consciousness need not be physical, meaning a person can have a knowledge of Hashem, where it's not just like using logic externally to try to prove Hashem's existence, but rather the person has an internal understanding that that Hashem does exist. And in fact, according to the Torah, Hashem breathed a neshama into us, and that neshama within us, in a sense, it is there's nothing but Hashem. So in a sense, like us knowing we exist in that sense could be us knowing that Hashem exists in a level that's truly knowledge, that doesn't rely upon logic. And similarly, I would note that our understanding that we exist is definitely not talui, it's definitely not dependent upon logic. Being that you have children where they haven't yet reached the age of logical axioms and proofs and thoughts, but they have an awareness that they exist, a certain consciousness, which implies that that is something intrinsic, something beyond logic. And based on that, one can extract perhaps that not only do we have logic as a tool for understanding truth, but we really have something additional, whatever we would call it. It's definitely outside of logic. This conscious understanding that we exist is a form of knowledge, and it definitely is not dependent upon logic. And so really, a person can accept the concept that we have certain capabilities, and these capabilities can know of Hashem, and logic need not be true for such a thing to be reasonable. Um, and so another element that I think was useful was when it comes to what a person believes and how a person acts. So the second thing this individual accepted was that if you would take a person's beliefs and look at the whole range of possible actions that this person might take, meaning take an infinite range of all the situations and scenarios and states that that person would be in, and based on his particular beliefs, so how would that person act in all of those scenarios? And so there's a one-to-one mapping of a certain belief to a certain set of, how a person, the range of the actions a person would do in every scenario. Meaning you take all the different scenarios, this person acts like this, and this. You can align it to a particular belief. And if the person's belief were slightly different, that person would act in different ways in these different situations. And so in a sense, a belief is really a set of actions in that sense. And so I asked him like if a person would act in 100% of a way of like a ben Torah, according to the Torah. A person would every moment they'd be thinking about serving Hashem and caring about other people and being selfless, realizing that they're just one of Klal Yisrael, and that Klal Yisrael is there to serve Hashem, and that physical pleasures have no place besides for bringing a person to serve Hashem and to objectively look at things in that perspective. And and so if a person would act according to the Torah, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," to truly love another person as yourself, so you would see a very different set of actions than your average person in society. I mean, it's just pashut. Like, sometimes you'll have discussions with atheists, and they'll try to sort of gaslight you, like, is a Jewish approach really gonna create more morality? But I think it's just pashut. Like, if you can love another person as yourself, and you realize every person has inherent godliness within them, like, it's simply going to change the way you see people and interact with people. And it's especially important in scenarios where nobody's looking, but a person has an understanding that Hashem is conscious of everything we do. So that is very much going to change the way we respond. I mean, you look at Samuel Bankman-Fried. There's someone I know who had his PhD funded by this guy, and people loved that. Like, he'd be on a conversation with someone who was funding him, and he'd be like playing a video game, and they thought it was like really cool. Like this is the society we live in. This is like, people are like, yeah, you should like not care about stuff. It's like really cool to not care. But so he was the head, so to say, of this effective altruism. This idea that you can have like a philosophy where you don't need God and you don't need like an objective morality. You can sort of like create your own philosophical, like, moral fabric and groundwork. And then when no one was looking, who would have thought? The guy, is, according to the news, was apparently being quite dishonest and misusing money. And the friend of mine who had his PhD funded by this guy and was into this effective altruism, so he lost his PhD. So I don't know if he took Musar from it, and started to come closer to Yiddishkeit. But in that sense, like, a person's actions very much do reflect their beliefs, and vice versa. And so if you could have a person where that person works very hard to try to act in exactly the way that the Torah defines, and you see this amongst Rosh Yeshiva and Gedolim, like, you see a godly person, like, you probably know people in your life where they're immersed in Torah, and they're a very refined individual. And that's if you could get that sort of refinement, if everything a person would do would be exactly according to the Torah, so that person, perhaps you would say that person's beliefs are avodas Hashem, and that person's beliefs are that Hashem is one, and all of the different things that we believe, that it's a mitzvah to do it. And so in that sense, a recommendation to that individual was that, and something I find in my life also, and I think it's a true Indian, is that the more that a person tries to act in a refined and godly way, so the more naturally that person's ideology and belief system is going to align with those actions. And so perhaps the fact that a person arrives at Yedias Hashem, 100% knowledge of the Ribbono Shel Olam, it's not necessarily through like a logical proof, right? It could be through a person becoming in touch with that intrinsic consciousness that they have, which is aware of Hashem because it's part and parcel of Hashem. And in that sense, their actions, where they're constantly trying to perfect themselves, it's putting them in touch with that neshama and in touch with that understanding. And on another level, by aligning their actions in such a way, so that really is shaping what their belief is, just like the belief shapes the actions. So those actions perhaps will by definition be correlated with this particular belief. And so perhaps for individuals who are thinking about Emunah and faith, so perhaps the best route is simply to try to act like a mensch, to try to serve Hashem, to become more refined, to do the mitzvos with simcha, and to try to grow in every area that we can, bein adam l'chavero, bein adam l'makom. And through that, a person's beliefs really become aligned in that way. And through that, a person becomes aware of this conscious understanding and knowledge of Hashem that they have internally. which is outside of the limited faculty of logic, and that in itself can bring a person to 100% Yediyas Hashem. I want to wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos.